How many of you are like me? After you finish reading a book, you immediately forget most of the contents. Or in another situation, after you've read like a book, a very useful book that you think could change your life, and you feel like amazing after you've read it. But then a few years later, and your life is still the same, and your bad habits are still there. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to read faster and how to make the most of your reading. So firstly is comprehension. So words per minute doesn't really matter because like the average word per minute is like 238, but there's also lots of variations. Some people read above, maybe like at 300 to 500 words per minute, and some people might only read like 150 to 200 words per minute. And what matters the most is the level of comprehension you've achieved after you've just finished reading the book. So most people think they comprehend the book after they just read and understand what it's saying, but there's actually there's a difference between understanding and comprehending something. So understanding is basically at a basic level. So it's where you're able to answer simple questions about what you just read, versus after you actually comprehended the book, then you're able to write. It's at like a deeper level, and you can write whole entire essays or in-depth dissertations about the book you've just read. So basically it's just a question of what level or depth of comprehension that you want to achieve or you have achieved while reading quickly. So an example is for example The Lord of the Flies. If you've just read it at a basic level and just understand it, then you know it's about a group of boys who are at an island and then what happens there. But if you've actually comprehended it at a deep level, you're able to understand the concepts behind it and how it's trying to talk about the cruel nature of humans, and how when they're left to with no actual moral things or any laws keeping them in place, then how bad things could get, to the point where they almost they risk each other's lives. So the reason why most people aren't able to read very fast or effectively is because they're using the wrong level of reading strategy for the level of comprehension that they want to get. So there are overall 4 levels of comprehension, and there's a fastest strategy for each level. So level 1 is literal comprehension. It's basically where you have a word-to-word understanding for what you've read. So for example, if you've ordered some furniture off of Amazon and it's arrived and there's an instruction booklet, then you're going to use literal comprehension to read that, because you only need to understand what it says on the word to be able to assemble the furniture together. And there's lots of speed reading techniques that target this level. So for example, stopping subvocalization. And subvocalization is basically when you're silently mouthing the words or saying the words in your head as you read them, which can really affect how fast you can read, because it limits how fast you can read to how fast you can speak. And another thing you can do is grouping words together. So instead of reading each word one by one, you can immediately just read multiple words in one go, which really significantly boosts your reading speed. And just using these techniques, you can read up to 1,000 words per minute, which is 7 times faster than the average university student. So the fastest reading strategy for literal comprehension is smart skimming. It's basically where you're scanning the text instead of reading linearly line by line and going down the page, to identify key elements such as headings, subheadings, bold words, or anything that really seems out of place. And this helps you gain a general understanding of what you're reading about, and quickly. And basically it's called smart skimming instead of just skimming, because you have to control when you skim and when you slow down, even within a sentence, because maybe you can skim across and you see a paragraph in bold and you think that might be important, then you actively slow down and read that one thoroughly, so you get the key information from that paragraph. or even in a sentence. Some are just filler words that you can skim over, and some important information you can read slower. And this can actually like boost your reading speed by 30 to 50%, and it also doesn't sacrifice comprehension like some of these other techniques might do, and it's also effective for other levels. And this like may be very useful for like basically just students in general, especially like foreign students who, when they come to like I think the UK, they have to do the IELTS exams, and in their comprehension, if they're able to skim and really quickly pick out the key informations for the questions, then they can like answer the paper much faster. And secondly is implied comprehension. So it's basically where you not only understand what you're reading like literally, but you're also able to read between the lines. So you're able to form additional conclusions beyond what is like explicitly explained on the text, and you can like infer meanings and like suggest what it's trying to say. Like for example, you could say like this line says this specific thing and the next says this, but I think it's trying to say like some other thing. And yeah, an example of this could be like, for example, like I mentioned before in the book The Lord of the Flies, when like the boy, they were fighting against each other, like it can instead of just like reading it like literally and just like knowing that they're fighting, and if you're actually reading between the lines, then you're like then you understand that what the author is trying to depict, which is like the cruel nature of humans and how like wild they can get basically. And yeah, often this can feel like true understanding, but one problem of this level 2 comprehension is a difficulty to remember or actually apply the information to like your life later, as you might lack depth and mastery for complex problem solving. So yeah, many people might mistake this for poor memory, but it's not actually. It's just a result for stopping at this level and not continuing going on to like these other levels over here. And it primarily depends on language fluency, which is easy for like native speakers usually, but it can get harder in like higher level learning or like, for example, universities, and it can be hard for like non-native speakers. So a strategy for this is immersion, basically just regular and wide exposure to the language by reading and writing, just like reading lots of books in that language or even listening to music in that language, because the more exposure you have, then the faster fluency grows, which is why, for example, maybe some people who are trying to learn like French, for example, instead of learning it at a school, if they actually move to the country, obviously they'll pick it up much quicker than if they learned it in a school, because their whole life everywhere would be like surrounded in those words and they'd hear it like every single second. And so level 3 is critical comprehension, and from level 2 to level 3 there's like a jump that's called like a bottleneck flip. It's basically where the limitation shifts from your speed to the comprehension depth, because at level 2 at this point you've probably already reached a speed that's quick enough, but the only thing that's limiting you to keep on improving is how much you understand or like comprehend. And yeah, at this point reading faster won't improve understanding. So level 3 is critical comprehension. It's basically where you're able to make judgments about the value of what you're reading and how much you've understood. And it's faster because it focuses on how much knowledge you retain and can apply or teach afterwards. Which, because when you're reading faster, you lack depth and lack understanding of what it's about. So oftentimes you have to read it again and again and go through like repeated study, which overall wastes a lot more time than if you just like started off slower. And yeah, if you read with no reflection, then you're basically just wasting your time. And this is when you like intentionally slow down and deliberately use sub-vocalization. So you deliberately have a voice in your head and you're taking pauses every time to think. And like many people may avoid this level because it seems really counterintuitive that to read faster you have to slow down first, but it's basically just so that you're understanding more in one go, and that you have, yeah, it may take more time, but then if you don't do this, then you have to read things multiple times. And like, for example, if you've just read a book, then you might forget lots of the content of it. But if you use this and read it, then you retain a lot more information. And so one way to achieve this is question and critique. It's basically, after each concept, pause and ask yourself questions about what you've read. For example, why is this important? Why do I care about this? And how does it compare with what I already know? And then make meaningful connections so that you can remember it better. An example of this is when, like in school, we were doing this book in English. We were doing this book called Things Fall Apart. And in the very first lesson, right after we received the books, I'd already finished reading the whole book. And I thought it was a lot of wasting time when the teacher would spend lots of time in the lessons going through one chapter in the book that I've already read before. But after a few lessons, I started to understand the book a lot more, and every single time we finished a chapter, he would make us write an essay on what we thought about what was going on, because it was about colonialism. And so basically, on one hand, when the Europeans came over, I thought it was really devastating that the whole entire traditions of the tribe and of the culture were suddenly ripped apart, and it caused a lot of disagreement within the tribe. And yeah, basically they had some really unique traditions that I thought was really sad to lose. But on the other hand, if the Europeans hadn't come over, then maybe it wouldn't have developed as much today. And there were also lots of violence within the tribes that didn't even make any sense. For example, if a woman had twins, then it was bad luck and they both had to be killed. Or and there were also lots of wars between other tribes, so it's really hard to pick a point. And this allowed me to think really critically about the concepts in the book, that the first time when I read by myself, I'd completely skipped over that and I didn't even think about it at all. And another example of this is the as I said before, the Lord of the Flies. It's trying to tell you about the cruel nature of humans. But then if you disagree with this and think about it, then you could also argue back by saying Confucius, he said that everyone was born innocent, and it's their environment that shapes who they become and how they develop as they get older. So you could say that, but you could disagree with the fact that humans have a cruel nature, because you could say they were all born innocent, so it's only the environment that shaped them to how they were. And level 4 is adaptive comprehension. It's basically where you use information from what you've read and apply and adapt it to your own unique, complicated context. And this is useful in solving complicated problems or solving high-stake decisions. And when you design plans or strategies, you have to be able to extract the useful information to you and then personalize with your expertise or your own experiences and adapt to your own needs or your personal life. And speed becomes less important in this part, because even if you read a little, by this point you've already developed enough skills to be able to lead to high quality outcomes that many people wouldn't be able to achieve within the first time of reading a book. So the way in which you can do this is by abstracting, applying and attacking. So abstracting is when you take something and then generalize it so it can apply to a wider context, and then extract the essential features out of it. And then applying is when you take the already abstracted concepts and try to use it in your own personal situation. And attacking is after you've applied and formulated an understanding, you deliberately look for counter arguments and assumptions, and you can even use ChatGPT for this by saying what you think and seeing if it can give you it from another perspective or point of view. An example of this is like a while ago, I read the book Atomic Habits, and in it the author said that in order to get good habits, you'd have to do like, there'd have to be a trigger first, and I really wanted to like try and prove if the technique actually worked or not. And so I wanted to have the habit of like being like to run in the mornings every single day. So my trigger would be that every single morning, like every night before I went to bed, I would put my running shoes by my bed and the running clothes as well, so that every single morning the first thing I saw when I woke up was the shoes and the clothes, and I'd immediately put them on and then go for a run. And in the end, I actually managed to stay consistent for quite a long time. And yeah, I was basically able to prove the point that it actually worked. And after I like applied it to my personal life, I was able to prove that using the good habits to get good habits to like trigger it, it actually managed to develop a good habit out of it. So in conclusion, I think, the main points to take away is probably that there's like many different levels of comprehension, and there's 4 levels of comprehension, and each one varies depending on your needs, and they're all really important. But I think one of the most important ones is like level 3, critical, where you're actually able to make judgments about the value for your reading and what you've understood, because that can actually take you deeper. And like level 4 as well, because you're actually able to apply various techniques that you've read about to your own personal life and actually make a change. So finally, I hope that, unlike before when you would just like read a book or like forget about it, forget most of the content afterwards, or you're actually able to use what you've read and those like useful books to like actually like make a change in your life and develop like bad habits, for example. That's all for today. Bye.